The winter wind cut through the mud-walled houses of Jiho's village, carrying with it the scent of smoke and decay. Snow clung to the thatched roofs like a thin veil, but beneath that fragile white was a darkness the regime could not hide. Children with hollow cheeks scavenged the frozen ground for scraps of corn husks, their tiny fingers cracked from cold. Old women stirred pots of boiling water flavored only with grass and bark, pretending it was soup. Hunger had become not a season but a way of life. Jiho sat crouched beside his sister Hannah, watching her thin frame shiver beneath a patched blanket. She was only 15, yet her skin clung to her bones, as if she were decades older. Her cough rattled the small room, breaking the heavy silence. Their mother pressed a rag to Hannah's lips, hiding the blood that stained it, though Jiho had already seen. He swallowed hard, forcing himself not to ask the question that burned in his chest. How much longer can she last? The state rations had not come for weeks. The neighborhood distribution officer claimed shipments were delayed. But everyone knew the truth. Food went first to the army, then to the elite in Pyongyang. Ordinary villagers like Jiho were expected to live on faith alone. The portraits of the supreme leader stared down at them from the wall, their glass frames fogged from the cold. Every morning, Jiho bowed before those faces. Not out of reverence, but out of fear, because soldiers patrolled the streets and neighbors whispered to the authorities. A missed bow could mean prison, or worse. That evening, Jiho ventured into the forest, desperate to find anything that could fill their stomachs. Snow crunched under his boots as he searched for edible roots, his breath clouding the air like smoke from an invisible fire. Every snapped twig made him flinch, for he knew patrols roamed even these barren woods. If caught gathering food without permission, he could be beaten, dragged to the village square, made into an example. Yet the thought of Hannah coughing herself into the grave gave him courage. Hours later, he returned with only a handful of frozen acorns. His mother ground them into powder, mixing it with water to create a bitter paste that they ate in silence. The taste was sour, but they swallowed every mouthful as though it were gold. Jiho watched Hannah's lips tremble as she forced it down. Her eyes met his, filled with something heavier than hunger, the quiet plea of someone who knew she was slipping away. That night, Jiho lay awake on the cold floor, the wind howling outside like a starving beast. He thought of the stories whispered by defectors of warm meals in China, of lights that never went dark, of freedom beyond the river. Yet between him and that dream lay soldiers with rifles, fences lined with barbed wire, and the knowledge that capture meant death. Still, as Hannah coughed in the darkness, Jiho made a silent vow. If I must risk everything, I will. I will not let her die in this coffin of a country. The market in Jiho's village was a place of shadows, even in daylight. Women crouched on tarps with hidden bundles of rice or contraband cigarettes tucked under rags, eyes darting nervously for patrols. The hum of whispered trades was broken only when soldiers passed, boots thudding like drums, their rifles slung casually across their shoulders. One wrong word could end a life, yet desperation made everyone gamble. Jiho walked carefully between stalls, his hunger sharpening his senses. He wasn't there for food, there was none he could afford, but for information. He had heard rumors of smugglers, men who risked their lives to guide others across the border. Most villagers dismissed such talk as fantasy, but Jiho clung to the thought like a drowning man clutching driftwood. Near the back of the market, past a stand selling wilted cabbage leaves, Jiho found Daesu. Once his schoolmate, Daesu now looked older, his face carved by lines of hardship. His clothes hung loosely from his body, but his eyes held a dangerous light. Jiho, Daesu whispered, pulling him aside into a narrow alley. You've been asking questions. Jiho's heart skipped. He nodded, cautious. Is it true? About crossing? About smugglers? Daesu glanced around, making sure no one lingered within earshot. A soldier's laughter echoed down the street, reminding them both that the walls had ears. There is a way, Daesu murmured, but it's not for the faint of heart. They hide people. Sometimes in carts, sometimes under floorboards, sometimes... He hesitated, his voice dropping to a rasp, in coffins. The word struck Jiho like a hammer. A coffin. The idea was grotesque, suffocating, but it also meant concealment. Soldiers rarely disturbed funerals, they too feared the spirits of the dead. Dasu leaned closer. The smuggler is careful. He knows how to bribe the guards. The price is high. If you're caught, you won't be sent to prison. You'll be sent to the grave. Jiho swallowed hard. Images flooded his mind. His sister's pale face, his mother's trembling hands, the bitter cold gnawing their lives away. If he did nothing, Hannah would die. If he tried, perhaps they could live. "Introduce me," Jiho whispered. Dasu studied him for a long moment, as though weighing whether his old friend truly had the courage. Finally, he nodded. "Tonight, after curfew. Come to the abandoned storage shed near the riverbank. No one must know. Not your family. Not even your mother." As Jiho returned home, the weight of the secret pressed heavy on his chest. He looked at Hannah lying weakly by the fire, her lips cracked from thirst, her breath shallow. He longed to tell her of his plan, to give her hope. But hope was dangerous. If anyone spoke, even in a dream, soldiers could come. That night, as the village descended into silence, Jiho crept out beneath a moonless sky. The risk was immense. But whispers in the dark had given him something greater than fear. The chance, however small, to escape. The abandoned storage shed by the river smelled of mildew and damp straw. Rats scurried across the floorboards as Jiho slipped inside, his breath tight in his chest. A lantern flickered dimly in the corner, casting long shadows against the warped walls. Dasu was already there, and beside him stood a man Jiho had never seen before, broad-shouldered, with a scar running across his cheek. The stranger's gaze was sharp, assessing Jiho as though weighing his worth. "This is him," Dasu said quietly. "The one I told you about." The scarred man nodded once. "Name Jiho," he answered, his voice unsteady. The man stepped closer. "You want to leave?" Jiho hesitated, then gave the only answer that mattered. "Yes." The man studied him in silence before finally speaking. "Hey, there are only 3 ways to cross: swim, bribe, or hide. The river kills more people than it saves. Bribes are too costly. It leaves one option." The Coffin. Jiho's stomach turned. "Coffin?" The smuggler's eyes hardened. "A funeral procession is less suspicious. Soldiers will look, but not too closely. We line the inside with cloth. You climb in. We seal it. We carry you toward the checkpoint before dawn. If no one interferes, you'll be across by sunrise." Jiho felt his blood run cold. He imagined the darkness, the lid shutting above him, the suffocating air, and if soldiers open it. The man's scar twisted as he gave a humorless smile. "Then you'd better look convincingly dead." Dasu shifted uncomfortably. "I've seen it work," he whispered. 2 men last winter. They made it. They're in China now, sending money back to their families. But Jiho also knew the other side of the story. People dragged from carts, beaten at checkpoints, vanished into prisons no one returned from. He thought of his father. The smuggler crouched before him, his voice low and blunt. "You want freedom? Dare, there's no safe way. There's only this way, but you must pay. Rice, valuables, anything?" Jiho shook his head helplessly. "I have nothing. Only." The man's eyes narrowed, then softened, just slightly. "Labor I can use. You'll work for me once you reach China. Carry goods. Keep quiet. You'll earn your keep, but fail me." His hand tightened into a fist, leaving the rest unsaid. Jiho nodded, though fear clamped down on him like iron chains. His mind swirled with terror and faint hope. The coffin was grotesque, but it was a door, perhaps the only door that could lead him out. When Jiho returned home, his mother asked why his hands trembled. He told her it was the cold. He sat beside Hannah, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and whispered silently to himself, "For her, I will climb into the coffin." The house was silent except for the sound of Hannah's weak breathing. Jiho sat in the dark, watching the shadows lengthen on the wall. Tomorrow night, he would be placed inside a coffin alive, desperate, pretending to be dead. The thought made his skin crawl. He rose quietly and walked outside. The village lay under a pale moon, snow crunching beneath his worn shoes. In the distance, the loudspeakers on tall poles stood silent for once. Their usual propaganda chants paused until dawn. But Jiho could still hear their echo in his head. "Our great marshal gives us life. Without him, we are nothing. Only lies." His father had believed in the slogans until the day he was dragged away. Jiho reached the edge of the frozen stream where reeds swayed like brittle fingers, crouched and plunged his hands into the icy water. It burned. He needed to feel something other than fear, something sharper than the pounding in his chest. Back home, he packed what little he had: a faded scarf, a dented tin cup, a photograph of his family before famine hollowed their faces. He tucked the photo carefully into his shirt. If he never returned, at least part of his family's memory would cross the border with him. His mother stirred when he entered. "Where were you?" she whispered, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion. "Just walking." She looked at him long, as if seeing through the thin veil of his words. "You've been restless, like your father before." Her voice broke, and she stopped. After a moment, she gripped his arm. "Jiho, whatever you are planning, survive. Promise me that. Survive." He couldn't tell her. If she knew, she would try to stop him, or worse, someone else might overhear. Spies lived in every street, hungry to report disloyalty for a few extra rations. He only nodded. "I will." Hannah stirred in her sleep, coughing weakly. Jiho bent down and pressed his lips to her forehead. She was so light now, as if she might vanish if he let go. He whispered, "I'll bring back food. I swear it." Later that night, he returned to the smuggler's shed. The coffin lay against the wall, its wooden planks roughly hammered together. It reeked faintly of incense and old cloth. Jiho touched the edge with shaking hands. Soon, he would climb inside and surrender to darkness, trusting strangers to carry him to freedom. The smuggler eyed him. "You understand? Once you get in, there's no turning back." "Yes," Jiho said, though his voice cracked. The man's scar caught the lantern light. "Then prepare yourself. Tomorrow before dawn, we move." Jiho stared at the coffin, heart hammering. It was a box meant for the dead, yet for him, it held the only chance at life. The night was so still, it seemed the world itself held its breath. Jiho stood beside the coffin, the rough wood smelling of pine and stale incense. A strip of white mourning cloth had been tied across the lid, as if to convince soldiers that grief lay within. The smuggler motioned with his hand. "Get in." His body screamed to run, but behind him lay starvation, surveillance, and death by inches. Ahead was this coffin, swallowed hard and climbed inside. The air inside was damp and suffocating. He felt the walls press against his shoulders, the ceiling mere inches from his face. Darkness swallowed him whole. For a moment, panic clawed at his throat. He wanted to thrash, to shout, to escape. But then he thought of Hannah, her fragile body shivering with fever. He forced himself still. The lid slid shut with a dull thud. Nails scraped as the smuggler hammered it secure. Jiho's chest tightened with every sound. Then silence. Only his own ragged breathing filled the void. The coffin lurched as two men lifted it onto their shoulders. Jiho's body rocked with each step. His ears filled with muffled noises, the crunch of snow under boots, the occasional cough, the low murmur of voices pretending to grieve. Imagined mourners walking behind him, their faces blank, their lies rehearsed. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat trickled down his spine despite the winter cold. The air grew thick, heavy, unbreathable. Jiho pressed his hand against his chest, willing his heart to slow. Then came the sound he dreaded most. Boots. Not the soft shuffle of villagers, but the hard, sharp rhythm of Korean soldiers. A voice barked. "Halt." The coffin stopped. Jiho held his breath. "Where are you taking the body?" a soldier demanded. The smuggler's voice answered smoothly. "My uncle, comrade. He died of illness. We are taking him for burial." A pause, then another voice, suspicious. "Open it." Jiho's blood froze. "No need, comrade," the smuggler said quickly, his tone respectful but trembling. "The body carries contagion. It is dangerous. Open it." The soldier barked again. Hands fumbled at the lid. Jiho's lungs screamed for air. His mind spiraled. If the lid opened now, if soldiers looked inside execution on the spot, his body shook uncontrollably, his fingernails digging into his palms. And then another voice, deeper, older. "Let them pass. It's freezing out here, and I won't waste time staring at another corpse."
"I'll move along."
Reluctantly, the soldier stepped back. The coffin shifted, lifted again. Jiho nearly sobbed with relief. As the men carried him forward, he whispered in the darkness, "Not yet. Please, not yet." The coffin creaked, swaying toward the next checkpoint. Freedom was still distant, but for now, he remained unseen. The coffin jolted sharply, waking Jeho from a half-delirious daze. He had drifted between consciousness and suffocation, counting each breath to stay alive. Now, he heard new voices. Louder, sterner. "Stop." A soldier barked. The carriers froze. Jeho could almost picture the scene. Rifles slung, eyes narrowed, suspicion like a blade. Another funeral? The soldier sneered. "Strange. Too many deaths lately, show me." Jeho's body stiffened. His fists clenched until his nails drew blood. The smuggler's voice cracked in protest. "Comrade, please." He was a farmer, starved, like so many others. "There's nothing unusual, a boot struck wood." The coffin rattled, the sound echoing in Jeho's skull. He bit his lip to silence a gasp. "Open it," the soldier ordered. Time seemed to stop. If they opened it now, it was over. Execution in the street, bullet through his skull. His family branded traitors. Hannah dragged away. The smuggler's tone turned desperate. "Comrade, his body is diseased. The doctor warned us smallpox, perhaps even worse. If you open the coffin, you risk contamination." A tense silence followed. Jeho felt his own heartbeats like thunder in the wooden chamber. Soldiers murmured among themselves. "Dead." Then the chilling scrape of metal, a rifled bayonet tapping the coffin lid. "Hatched." The wood groaned under the pressure. Jeho's lungs locked. Every instinct screamed for him to bolt, to smash the coffin open and run. But there was nowhere to go. He was buried alive in a lie. Suddenly, another voice broke through, firm and commanding. "Enough." It was a senior officer. "If it's disease, we cannot afford to risk the unit. Let the peasants bury their dead. We've wasted enough time." The bayonet lifted away. Jeho nearly sobbed with relief, but he forced himself still, silent as the grave he pretended to be. The coffin lifted again, swaying as the carriers hurried forward, eager to escape scrutiny. Jeho's body trembled, drenched in sweat despite the cold air outside. His throat burned from holding back screams. Inside the suffocating darkness, he whispered to himself, "Just a little longer, just a little longer." Yet even as the coffin moved toward the border, dread coiled tighter in his gut. Soldiers were suspicious now. Their patience would not last forever. And Jeho knew one terrible truth. Sunrise was coming. In daylight, lies became harder to hide. For now, he was still breathing, still hidden. But the coffin had become a prison with no guarantees. Freedom was only a few miles away, yet death lurked at every step. As the night was fading, Jeho could sense it. Even inside the coffin, the air grew cooler, thinner. He could almost feel the pale touch of dawn pressing against the wood above him. His heart pounded faster with each sway of the coffin, carried through dirt roads toward the border. But with every step forward, he knew danger was drawing closer. Funerals belonged to night. By morning, soldiers would ask questions no lie could answer. The carriers whispered nervously. Jeho strained to hear. One muttered, "The checkpoint at the bridge. They'll never believe it." Another replied, "Just act natural. Pretend grief. Don't let them suspect." Jeho squeezed his eyes shut. Pretend grief. He was the grief, hidden in wood and darkness. His life depended on the trembling shoulders of men he barely knew. The coffin jolted as they slowed. Voices ahead. Soldiers again. Boots scraping on gravel. "Where are you headed?" soldier barked. "To bury him across the river," the smuggler answered, his voice steady but thin. The soldier grunted. "Strange. 8 funerals before sunrise. Show me the face of the dead." Jeho's blood froze. His lungs clenched so hard he thought they might collapse. "This was it?" the smuggler stammered, searching for excuses. "Comrade," his family insisted. "The old superstition, you know how peasants are. The spirit must be buried before dawn, or it wanders." The soldier laughed harshly. "Superstitions. Always an excuse." He stepped closer. Jeho heard the creak of leather straps, the jingle of rifle metal. "Open it." The coffin tilted, set down on the cold ground. Jeho's world spun. His lips trembled against the stale air. His body screamed to breathe, to move, but he pressed himself flatter, stiller, as if he were already a corpse. A crow cawed nearby, and silence. Jiho imagined the soldier's hand on the lid ready to rip away his last shield. But another sound cut through her truck's horn blaring down the road. Orders shouted. Chaos. A new group of soldiers was arriving, demanding attention. The first soldier cursed under his breath. Fine, go bury your dead. Quickly, before I change my mind. The coffin lifted again, jerking Jiho's body painfully. His lungs gasped for air as quietly as possible. The carriers moved faster now, feet pounding dirt, desperate to reach the river crossing, before sunlight revealed everything. Inside, Jiho whispered to himself, just a little longer, just until the river, please. But in his heart, he knew the sun was already climbing. The sky was lightening. No coffin could hide a living man forever. The horizon was turning gray when the carriers reached the riverbank. Jiho felt the air shift inside the coffin lighter, colder as if dawn itself was prying through the cracks. His breath came shallow, trembling. Every second mattered now. But soldiers were waiting at the crossing. Boots thudded against wood planks. Rifles clinked. A commanding voice cut the air. Stop the procession. The coffin lurched to a halt. Jiho's blood iced. Through the wood he could hear the river rushing, freedom so close he could almost taste it. But between him and that hope stood men trained to sniff out lies. What is this? Another soldier demanded. A funeral, comrade, the smuggler answered, his voice tight. Before sunrise? The soldier scoffed. You think we're fools? Too many tricks lately. Too many rats slipping through in coffins, sacks of rice, even pig carts. He spat. Open it. Coffin slammed onto the ground. The carriers hesitated. Silence stretched like a noose. Jiho's heart hammered so loudly he feared they would hear it. He clenched his jaw, willing himself into stillness, into death. But his body betrayed him. His chest rose with one desperate breath, shallow but visible if uncovered. The lid creaked. Light leaked in, pale gray dawn, piercing the darkness. Jiho's eyes burned. His lungs screamed. Then hands ripped the lid wide open. The soldiers stared down into the coffin. Jiho froze, his skin clammy, his lips parted in half-breath. For an instant, he thought perhaps he looked corpse-like enough, a man drained of life. But the soldier leaned closer, squinting. A smirk curled his lips. He's breathing. The world crashed. The smuggler shouted something. But Jiho didn't hear it. He heard only the click of a rifle being cocked, the rush of boots surrounding the coffin. Rough hands seized him, yanking him upright. His legs buckled, half dead from hours of stillness. The carriers scattered, some running, others pleading. The smuggler dropped to his knees, begging. Jiho was hauled out like a trapped animal, his limbs flailing weakly. The soldier sneered. Thought you could cheat the Republic? Thought you could crawl into China like a rat? He struck Jiho across the face with the butt of his rifle. Pain burst through his skull. Jiho fell, tasting blood, staring at the river just beyond. It shimmered with morning lights, so close, yet impossibly far. Bind him, the commander ordered. Take him back. As ropes dug into his wrists, Jiho's last glimpse of freedom slipped away with the river's current. Dawn had come, and with it, the end of his escape. Jiho's wrists were bound so tightly that the rope burned into his skin. Soldiers shoved him into the back of a rattling truck, its metal floor biting into his knees. The coffin that had promised freedom now lay abandoned by the riverbank, a symbol of his shattered dream. Every bump of the truck jarred his bones. Every gust of cold air through the slats reminded him of what he had lost. At the checkpoint near his village, Korean soldiers jeered and spat at him. Some called him traitor, others dog of the West. Jiho stared at the ground, his mind screaming but his lips locked shut. He knew words could only bring more pain. Inside a concrete cell, interrogation began. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging as if mocking him. His captors demanded names who had arranged the coffin, who else was plotting escape, which neighbors whispered dissent. Jiho said nothing. Silence earned him blows across the face, kicks to the ribs, hours without water. When he finally spoke, it was only to repeat, I acted alone. But they did not believe him. They never did. To the regime, no man acted alone. Every thought of escape must be tied to conspiracy. Days bled into nights. Jiho's body grew swollen with bruises, but the deeper wound came when his mother and sister were summoned. Dragged before the authorities, their frightened faces were held up as leverage. "Confess, or your family pays the price," barked the officer. Jiho's eyes locked on his sister's trembling hands. She was too thin, her lips cracked from hunger. He wanted to protect her, but chains bound his choices. His silence was a blade if he broke. The smuggler and others might die. If he held firm, his family would suffer. Finally, the officer smiled cruelly. "Your coffin will become a cage," he said. "You wanted to escape death, but death is loyal to traitors." Jiho was dragged back into his cell. The door clanged shut, sealing him in darkness. He curled against the cold wall, his ribs aching, his wrists raw. Sleep would not come. Every sound, the drip of water, the shuffle of boots, echoed his failure. The worst betrayal was not from the smugglers, not from the soldiers, but from hope itself. He had dared to believe in freedom, and now that belief was being used as a weapon against him. As dawn crept again beyond the tiny barred window, Jiho whispered a silent apology to his family. The coffin had not carried him to freedom, but to chains, and those chains were tightening with every passing hour. The cell reeked of sweat, mold, and despair. Jiho had lost all sense of time. Days blended into nights, and nights into endless pain. His wounds festered, his lips split with thirst, yet the worst agony came not from the beatings, but from the memories that would not let him rest. His sister's frail figure, his mother's hollow eyes. Their faces haunted him in the dark, whispering accusations and forgiveness all at once. One morning, the cell door creaked open. 2 Korean soldiers entered, their faces stern but unreadable. Without a word, they dragged Jiho to the courtyard of the prison camp. The rising sun painted the sky blood red, a cruel mockery of freedom. Other prisoners stood in rows, watching silently. Some looked away. Others stared with pity, or perhaps envy, for they knew his fate. Jiho felt the stares burn into him as he was forced to kneel. The officer from his interrogation stepped forward, a man whose smile was colder than the iron bars. He unrolled a piece of paper and read Jiho's sentence. For betraying the people, for attempting to defect, and for conspiring with outside forces, the traitor Jiho shall be punished as an example to all. The words echoed across the yard like a death bell. Jiho bowed his head not in submission but in exhaustion. His fight was over, yet in that moment, as he closed his eyes, Jiho saw not the prison, nor the soldiers, nor the officer's smirk. He saw fields beyond mountains, rivers that did not freeze with barbed wire, markets where children laughed freely, families who could sit at a table without fear of who might be listening. He saw freedom so close, yet forever beyond reach. 2 soldiers approached, carrying something long and wooden. Jiho recognized it instantly. A coffin. His coffin. Terror surged through him, but so did bitter irony. The box that had promised freedom would now serve its original purpose. It kept it, waiting for this day. The officer's voice dripped with mockery. "This time, you won't escape from it." They forced him inside, the lid pressed down, sealing away the last flicker of light. Darkness engulfed him. Jiho gasped for air, the wood rough against his cheek, his body trembling. He thought of his sister once more, praying silently that she might survive, even if he did not. And then, in the suffocating silence, Jiho smiled faintly. Not because he had one he hadn't, but because, even chained, beaten, and buried in a coffin, he had dared to dream of something greater than survival. The soldiers hammered the lid shut. Each strike echoed like thunder, sealing his story in wood and darkness. The coffin that once carried hope now carried silence. And before sunrise, Jiho's struggle ended.